Welcome and thank you for joining the SEEDS event today entitled Visualizing Success. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Bryce Olsen, Chief Employee Development Directorate. Dr. Olsen, we are honored that you are with us. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. It looks like we have a small group today, which is great because we're going to be doing a lot of interaction. And so this will be a good opportunity to interact together and learn together. So to give a brief introduction of myself, I'm the Chief of Employee Development in the Learning and Development Division of HCS. This is a fairly new team, this Employee Development Directorate. We're responsible for providing products and services to support the continued professional and personal growth of VBA employees. So actually these SEEDS events are something that fall under the Employee Development Directorate, along with on-demand trainings and some other programs that we run. Before we start, I also want to introduce Elizabeth Pravat. She is one of our learning management officers and the SEEDS program manager. I think she's waving there. She's going to be assisting me today, monitoring the chat and helping out as needed. So grateful to have her, and also just really grateful for Kat, who is our host, and all the others who have done a lot of work behind the scenes and are providing technical assistance. So I'm excited to speak today on this topic of visualizing success and visions and goals. It's something I'm really passionate about and I've had the opportunity to learn about and utilize throughout my career. So I'm excited to share that. And I just want to give a reminder that the target audience today is VBA managers. So the participants here are in supervisory roles. So just take note of that as we have different discussions and go throughout the session. I'm going to go through the objectives and the agenda to start. Our objectives are pretty clear. We have 3 here. The first is to visualize what success looks like in your life and for your team. Second, be able to narrow your focus to the 1 to 2 things that will drive success. Third, develop a clear vision and goals to guide you and your team to success. And then we've got a pretty packed agenda, as you can see. So there's a lot that we're going to dive into. There's a lot on here. And after we get through the content, we're going to have some time for an open discussion and an audience Q&A, and then we'll wrap things up and have the survey at the end. I am really excited to be able to present this topic at this specific time of the year. We're closing out fiscal year 24 and developing plans for FY25. So my hope is that you'll be able to take away something from this event that will help you in developing really strong FY25 strategic plans. Before we jump into everything and all the content, I do want to touch on some of our resources. So most of what we're going to be talking about today will pull from these 2 books. The first one is Franklin Covey's 4 Disciplines of Execution. This is written by Chris McChesney, Sean Covey, and Jim Hooley. And the second one is The One Thing, The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Really want to recommend everyone take some time to read these 2 excellent resources. I'm going to touch on some principles in these books, but there are troves of wisdom. There is wonderful examples and principles and frameworks in here that you can use in your personal life as well as in your professional life. So please read these. Another thing I want to touch on, throughout this session, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. And like Kat said at the beginning, if you want to put the answer in the chat, that's great. If you want to come off mute and talk a little, that is great as well. Just raise your hand and we'll call on you to come off mute. I also want to invite you to grab a notepad and pen because we're going to be doing a lot of brainstorming and developing throughout this session. I'd almost consider this more of a workshop. So I want you to be able to come out of this session, going back to our objectives, having developed a clear vision and a goal for your team that is narrowed down to the 1 to 2 things that will determine success. So throughout this session, I'm going to interweave a personal story of how I've seen these principles in action to hopefully bring some of these principles to life. So I'm going to begin now with some of my story. All right, so prior to my current role, I worked for VHA in Colorado. This is the Rocky Mountain Regional Medical Center that you're looking at. It's in Aurora, Colorado, in the Denver metro area. While there, I was the designated learning officer. That is the VHA's term, in essence, for the Director of Learning and Development. So I oversaw learning and development for this healthcare system, the Eastern Colorado healthcare system. It's a healthcare system about 3,500, 4,000 employees. It covers the Denver metro area, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and some outlying clinics. So as part of this role, I served on the well-being team. This was a team that was led by our pilot chief well-being officer and consisted of her, myself, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Manager, and the Employee Engagement Officer. So AES scores and overall morale at the healthcare system were pretty low and had been for a while. And the main objective of this well-being team, this was a pilot team, was to improve that. One of the things that we found as we went and started interviewing people and analyzing the AES data was that morale was significantly affected by whether employees felt successful or not. So think about that. Their feeling of if they were being successful in their position really affected their morale. But what's success? What is success for an individual? What's success for a team, for an organization? And honestly, we couldn't get a clear answer. The healthcare system, as all organizations do, they had developed strategic plans and priorities, but there was a lot of them. Which one's important? Which one's the most important? If we only accomplish half of them, is that still considered success? What metrics should we look at? There were so many different plans and priorities. It was really hard to know. And so what happened is that strategic plans would be unveiled, but then we often saw that people would just go back to their day job and they wouldn't really talk about them. They'd be unveiled, we'd get excited, and then we'd just go back to what we were doing every day. It was difficult for staff to really stay connected with the strategic plan. For example, how would a physical therapist in spinal cord injury affect a major organization-wide initiative regarding financials? So in short, employees, they couldn't really visualize success for themselves or their teams or the organization, and morale was being affected. So I'm going to pause there. We'll revisit the story later, but I want you to think about, does anything in this story sound familiar to you? Have you experienced anything like this? My guess is you probably have. It's pretty common. I'm going to ask two questions as we kind of dive into some of the barriers for visualizing success. And I'd like you to really think about this and maybe write down some thoughts. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. But the first question is, what stands in the way of you feeling successful in your position? And the second question, since we're supervisors here, what stands in the way of your employees feeling successful in their position? So I'm going to give you about a minute, 2 minutes. Think about that. Write some things down, and then I'm going to ask you all to share, whoever's willing to share what they came up with. All right, anyone willing to share? Anyone willing to share? What are some barriers? So we have unclear or poorly conveyed goals or metrics for success. Excellent. Nothing is straightforward. Work around for everything. Feels like we're swimming upstream. I've definitely felt that, Lisa. Thank you for sharing. We got two people that shared, we got competing priorities and constant change. Last minute taskers that are never finished. Not always knowing the end goal on a project. Not being given enough information. So I'm seeing some definite themes in the answers that you gave, and luckily I prepared for these themes. So my guess is that one of these three things factored into your answer. Whatever it was you wrote down or whatever it is you shared, likely one of these key questions factors into that feeling of what is success. So the first one is, what is success? You and your employees, they may not know what success looks like in the context of their everyday work. The second is, what's the priority? I know I've heard that there's a lot of different priorities. How do we know what is the most important? There's never going to be enough time to accomplish everything that's important. So how do we know what is really considered a priority and what will really bring success? And then lastly, how do I know if I've arrived? Oftentimes success, we may know what it is, but it's a very abstract concept. It seems maybe unattainable. It's not something that is really clear as to when we have arrived, when we've achieved that success, or even how we fit into the equation. So these are some questions that your employees may be asking subconsciously. It's questions that you've probably asked yourself subconsciously. Questions that, if could be answered, could increase engagement, could increase morale, and could increase effectiveness. So my hope today is that through some of the methods and guidance that we're going to talk about, I hope that you'll be able to help your employees find answers to these questions. So that first question, what is success? And in order to do this, we need to take a 30,000-foot view and determine what is that success. I'll give a caveat. A lot of what we're talking about today, it's easy principles. They are easy to talk about. They don't seem difficult, but in reality, it's in practice where they get difficult. So have you ever asked yourself this? Have you ever asked yourself before, what does success look like in my position or in my team or in our organization? This is one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm interviewing for a job. What does success look like in this position? What will success look like in 6 months, in a year from now? I find that this question, it not only helps me to understand the expectations of the position, but it also helps me to see how well my leaders understand what is expected of the position. Oftentimes we get so busy with deadlines, with to-dos, the day-to-day, that we neglect taking that step back and just having some time with our team to really reflect and ask ourselves these important perspective type questions. So in a couple of sentences, are you able to write down what success looks like for your team? If you're not, then you have some homework to do. As leaders, it's our job to be able to define success and then provide the pathway for the team to reach it. So if you're struggling to know what success looks like for yourself or your team, if you're able to sit down and you're able to write down in a couple sentences what is success, awesome. That is wonderful. And I would highly encourage you to make sure everyone on your team can do that as well. If not, if you're struggling to know what success looks like for yourself or your team, where could we go? If we could have some people put into the chat, what are some resources that we might have available to us to help us find success? As you think, I'll give a few. Your performance plan. Your performance plan should give an idea of what success looks like in your position, or maybe for your team. What are other things? What are other resources we could go to? Excellent. Performance description for each position. Oftentimes there are strategic plans or goals from levels above you. Oh, I like that, Lisa. Thank you. I'm on the quality review team. Oftentimes our success is the success of others. So knowing, you have to have a good understanding of the organization and understand what the organization, what other teams are trying to accomplish, because when they're successful, then you're successful. That's excellent. Some other ideas: the mission, vision, and values of your organization. What are the mission, vision, values of the VA, of the VBA? We talked about your performance plan, strategic goals and plans from levels above you. The biggest one I'd say is just ask your leadership. Go talk to your leaders that are above you and ask them, what is your vision of success for this team? And you're going to get some really good things. A lift session, excellent, with your customers so you know what they consider success. That's a wonderful way to find success, because you're focusing on the impact you have on others. So before we move on, just keep thinking about this. I would like you to take a minute and write down a sentence or two regarding what success would look like for your team. If you aren't sure right now, it's all right. If you need to consult some resources, that's okay. Just give it a shot. Give a first draft of this exercise. We can always go back and change it. Now that we have that idea of what success looks like, whether it's more of an abstract idea or if it's something very clear and measurable, it's our role as leaders to provide a pathway to achieve that success. So the next step in providing the pathway is to do something that most would consider counterintuitive, and that's to do less. Spoken in a different way, to narrow our focus. So I'm going to go back to my story for a minute. If you remember, employees were struggling with visualizing success in their roles and how they contributed to the organization's success. Our organization, we did have a yearly strategic plan. It had metrics and key performance indicators to reach. And Ideally, that should be clear enough to tell the team what success is, right? We're successful if we hit our metrics. Well, there were a lot of metrics. There were a ton of metrics and tons of priorities. There were metrics, initiatives, goals focused around accessibility, around quality, around veteran experience, around employee experience. That's a lot for employees to keep track of. It's hard to know which one you should really put your effort into. And if one team's effort could even make a difference in these large goals. In essence, there were so many priorities and plans that many employees didn't know what to focus on for that vision of success. I'm wondering if that sounds familiar to anybody, if anyone has dealt with this before or seen this before. I love the quote that we have here on this slide. If you chase two rabbits, you will not catch either one. I love this quote because it sounds so obvious, and yet in our lives and in our organizations, we do this all too often. So this is where I really want to explore some of the principles from the one thing and from the 4 disciplines of execution. Before we do that, let's watch a short video clip that further introduces this concept.
I recently read the book The One Thing by authors Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Gary is the founder of the largest real estate agency in the United States, Keller Williams. He is also a best-selling author and a successful business coach. Over the years, he's learned to achieve success in a rather unconventional way. You see, after college, Gary got into the real estate industry and was hell-bent on being the best in his field. He bought into the philosophy that if you're going to succeed, you need to juggle many things and take on many responsibilities. Each morning, he would listen to an inspirational theme song just to pump himself up to get ready for the torrent of demands that would come his way. Gary ended up dissipating his energy so far and stretching his attention so thin that he eventually burned out. Gary says, "It got me success and it got me sick. Eventually, it got me sick of success." At that point in his career, he decided to try a different approach. He intentionally started focusing on fewer things. He says, "I challenged the axioms of success, and guess what? I became more successful than I'd ever dreamed possible and felt better than I'd ever felt in my life." He realized that people achieve success in spite of doing many things, not because they do many things.
People achieve success in spite of doing many things, not because they do many things. I love that. Now, it may sound simple, just focus on less. That's all we got to do. While it's a simple concept, it's easier said than done. Narrowing our focus can be difficult, but doing so can really provide a measurable impact. Highlight that a little bit through a term called context switching. So computer scientist Gerald Weinberg, he highlighted this point when he did some research regarding context switching. Weinberg's done some very significant research, and his data has shown that when someone is focused on one task, they can dedicate 100% of their productivity time to that task. Makes sense, right? When you ask someone to focus on 2 tasks, you would think that they would be able to dedicate 50% of their productivity time to one task and 50% to the other. That would make sense. What his research found, though, was that in reality, only about 40% of our productive time goes to each task, with 20% of our productive time then being lost to context switching. Context switching, in other words, is time spent recovering from distractions, remembering where we were at, getting back into the details of a project, things like that. What's interesting, though, is that when you ask someone to focus on 3 tasks, the results are even more significant. People who are asked to focus on 3 tasks only spend about 20% of their productive time on each task. That totals 60%, meaning that 40% of your productive time is lost to context switching. This same principle, it applies to organizational priorities. When people are asked to focus on too many priorities or goals within an organization, very few, sometimes none, get accomplished. So what do? We need to narrow our focus. And how do we do that? We need to understand and we need to accept that there's a lot of things we could do, but what is the one thing that's going to ensure success? In the 4 disciplines of execution model, they call that the WIG. If you've heard of that term, the WIG, it's the wildly important goal. I'm going to share a video that explains more of what a wildly important goal is, but before I do so, I want to give some background context. So in Franklin Covey language, the whirlwind is all of the day-to-day things you need to do to keep the organization running. It's your day job. Chris McChesney is going to discuss how we can fit a wildly important goal, or that one thing that will lead to success amidst all the craziness of the whirlwind.
The first discipline is to focus on the wildly important. If a team has 2 to 3 goals in addition to the whirlwind, they can usually get 2 to 3 done. When that same team attempts 4 to 10 goals, how many do you think they're going to get done now? Far fewer. They actually go backwards. This is the law of diminishing returns, and it is as real as gravity. You can ignore it, but it won't ignore you. At 11 to 20 goals, you're not likely to accomplish anything in addition to the whirlwind. But 0 doesn't mean that the team isn't getting any results. The whirlwind is still running, right? 0 means the team isn't executing anything new. 0 means that leadership is kind of irrelevant. Now, while this is a simple enough idea, it's very difficult for most teams or organizations to adhere to. Here's why. Imagine those 11 to 20 goals for a second and ask yourself this. In your experience, are those 11 to 20 goals based on good ideas or bad ideas? They're almost always based on good ideas, and that's the problem. There will always be more good ideas than there is capacity to execute. Apple is known for being one of the most innovative companies in the world. That's not actually how they think of themselves. Here's a great quote from Tim Cook to a group of shareholders back in 2008. He said, "We are the most focused company that I know of or have read of or have any knowledge of. We say no to good ideas every day. We say no to great ideas in order to keep the amount of things we focus on very small in number so we can put enormous energy behind the ones we do choose." The table each of you are sitting at today, you could probably put every product on it Apple makes, yet Apple's revenues last year were $40 billion. There are 2 focus traps we want you to be aware of. Number 1, saying yes to all the good ideas, what we've been talking about. Number 2, turning everything in the whirlwind into a goal. We measure a lot of things in the whirlwind that are necessary to maintain the operation. But just because you can measure something doesn't mean it needs to be a goal for optimization. If we try and optimize every objective, every metric in the whirlwind, particularly if they require a change in behavior, we inevitably stall the organization. It's okay for the whirlwind to occupy 80% of an organization's energy. That's life support after all. But don't let it take 100%. Give the other 20% to the thing that is going to make all the difference, the thing you are going to blow the doors off of. We call this a wildly important goal, or a WIG.
So go back to what you determined success would look like for your team. Now I want you to ask yourself, what is the one thing that your team needs to do differently or become that will give them the greatest chance for success to be realized? In the book, The One Thing, they call this the focusing question. And the focusing question reads like this: what is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Ask yourself these questions. That's your one thing. That's your wildly important goal. Now, narrowing our focus, it can be hard because it's counterintuitive. Most ambitious people, they don't want to do less, they want to do more. I'd assume that most of you leaders are in that camp of wanting to do more. You're high achievers, you want to accomplish a lot. But remember that when we focus on less, we may not do more, but we accomplish more. So narrowing our focus, it's going to require us to say no to good ideas like Chris McChesney talked about. It will require you to do what they explain in The One Thing as moving from a to-do list to a success list. To-do lists, they're focused on getting things done, but often they aren't ordered by priority, more by just what you thought of first. A success list, though, is where you write down the steps that take you to extraordinary results. It's where you really narrow down what are the 2 to 3 things that need to be done to find that vision of success. And then that is what you focus on. You may have heard of the Pareto principle. That it was mentioned in this last video that 20% of your efforts will bring about 80% of your results. Your success list focuses on those 20% efforts and narrows them down even further to determine the few things that will ensure success. So I'm going to get back to my story that I've been telling. So if you remember, employees were having a hard time understanding and juggling all the different priorities and how to find success. The organization had 4 main priorities: access, quality, employee experience, and veteran experience. As is happening across the VA, and I'm sure you're all aware of, there are some significant budget shortages. It was found that a significant number of veterans in Eastern Colorado were getting their healthcare from community providers and not at the VA. And that's a big issue. Not only are VA providers and facilities equipped to provide the best care to veterans, but a significant portion of the budget was leaking out to pay those community care costs. So our executive director, explained to leadership that not only will this cause a future budget crisis, but it will be hard to justify even having a VA facility when such a large portion of our veterans are seeing non-VA providers for their care. So this issue did actually fit into one of our 4 main priorities: access. So our director recognized that this was an opportunity to narrow our focus as an organization, focus on one thing, and hopefully provide a pathway for employees to be successful. So as such, he set a vision for our healthcare system to become the premier healthcare provider of choice for veterans in Eastern Colorado. Great vision, right? But how do we accomplish that? How do we know when we've arrived? It was a big question. And it was determined that this would be measured through the goal of reducing total community care expenditures. That's a major undertaking. It would take significant behavior change and the help of everyone in the healthcare system to achieve this. For example, how's a frontline social worker going to not only care about that goal, but see how they can contribute to that goal? So what they did is they brought in this Franklin Covey 4 Disciplines of Execution framework. And they gave me the responsibility of not only teaching the entire healthcare system to use this framework, but also to incorporate it into the organization's strategic plan to reach this goal. Luckily, I was able to receive significant one-on-one training from Franklin Covey consultants and became what they call the 40X head coach for the organization. So then I, along with the Franklin Covey consultants, we assisted executive leadership with strategic planning for this. We organized and executed trainings for all leaders in the organization, from executive all the way down to frontline supervisors. We established an organization-wide scoreboard to track our progress, and then we launched. Post-launch, I continued to provide follow-up trainings, train other trainers, provide one-on-one leadership coaching sessions, etc. I can't, unfortunately, give the final outcomes of this initiative because it's still ongoing. But what I did see was that through implementation of this framework, through giving the team something they can focus on, they were able to catch the vision. And staff was able to see how they could individually contribute to a large organization-wide goal. They were able to develop measurable goals for their teams and specific actions within their control that would lead to the accomplishment of those goals. They set up scoreboards to track their progress. I saw engagement and excitement improve. People were focused. They knew what success looked like. They knew how they contributed to that success, and they had a pathway to get there. So it was honestly really, really rewarding to witness. So let's get into how we make this happen as leaders. So once we've determined what success looks like, and we've narrowed that down to the one thing that will ensure success, we need to develop a vision and goals for our team. That's how we provide that pathway to success. So I have right here some bullet points that differentiate a vision from a goal, and I'm just going to read through these. So a vision is the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. It's a mental image of what the future will or could be. It's a statement of what you, your team, or your organization wants to become. Think become. It's the why. Now, the goal, on the other hand, is the object of a person's ambition or effort. It's the object of their vision. It's an aim or a desired result. It's the destination of a journey. It's measurable. It's that measurable destination that represents your vision. Think, how do I know when I've arrived? It's the what. So there's some key differences to highlight here. A vision is more abstract and helps you to catch the vision in a sense. It should be motivating. It should be exciting to think, this is what I could become. This is what our team could become. And it's a statement. A goal is measurable and it provides a finish line. It helps us know objectively when we have reached the vision, and it usually involves some sort of representative metric or number. I want to ask if anyone has seen a good vision recently that they would like to share in the chat, or a vision that they've seen from a company, from an organization, maybe from their team, from their organization, any that they would like to share. Or you think, I'm going to share an example, a couple examples that I found. So this is from the private sector, so it's obviously focused on revenue, a little bit different than what we focus on. This is for CVS Health. Their vision is to improve the lives of those we serve by making innovative and high-quality health and pharmacy services safe, affordable, and easy to access. It's a good vision. It clearly describes what they want to become as an organization. But how do we know when they've gotten there? So in their 2022 strategic goals, one of their strategic goals was to increase total revenue from 304 to 309 billion. That is a great goal because it represents the vision. Increased revenue is indicative of increased sales, which shows that their products were determined by the customer to be innovative, high quality, safe, affordable, and accessible. A government example may be for a vision to be the federal employer of choice for the Tri-Lakes region. A goal then to know how we've gotten there might be increased best places to work score from 72 to 75 by October 2025. Hopefully it's clear the difference there. That vision is just saying what we want to become, whereas the goal is really putting some numbers to it so we know when we have arrived. And this is somewhere where I've seen leaders slip up when they create strategic plans, is by not understanding that key difference. They often confuse visions for goals, and they'll give a vision claiming it's a goal, but it's actually just a vision. Because if we don't know when we've arrived, it's not really a goal. So make sure that you don't confuse those two things and that you give a good, inspiring vision, and then you provide a goal that allows the team to know when they've arrived. All right, so now that we've established the difference between a vision and a goal, I want you to apply it. Like I said, we're going to have this be a little bit of a workshop. So think back to the exercise we did at the beginning. And Kat, we can go to the next slide, please. I asked you to think about what success looks like in your organization, your division, your team. I then had you narrow it down to the one thing that would ensure success is realized. Now I want you to take that narrowed down image of success, that one thing, and write a one-sentence vision statement. This vision statement should clearly state what your team needs to become to realize success. While you do that, while you think about that and write down your vision statement, I'm going to share some guidelines and some examples. So guidelines, couple sentences. It communicates, again, what you want to become. It's focused on 1 to 2 most important things. It should be simple. A general audience should be able to understand it. It does not include the how. It's just what you want to become. So some examples: Disney, to be one of the world's leading producers and providers of entertainment and information. Nike, to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And IKEA, to create a better everyday life for many people. So due to time, I'm not going to have people share their vision, but I want you to remember that a vision is just that. It's a statement to provide motivation and direction. It helps your employees know what you're trying to become. It does not, however, give those specifics regarding how to get there and when you've arrived. That's where the goals come in. And that's the last section we're going to talk about today. So turning that vision into a measurable goal gives your team that pathway to success. So I want you to take that vision that you just wrote, that one-sentence vision, and I want you to write a goal that would help you know when you have reached the vision. Don't worry about having clear-cut numbers. If you need to go do some research, that's fine. Just give something that can help you know when you've reached the vision. Some guidelines here. It should be clear, simple, and measurable. The way I like to describe it is there should be a clear starting line, a clear finish line, and a clear deadline. So that would be written in the format of from X to Y by when. And then a big aspect of writing good goals is it should be something that you can complete without relying heavily on others, so that your team can really take ownership of this. So I've got a couple examples here. So a vision would be to be the healthiest version of myself. Now you may determine that the way you know when you've arrived is when you've hit your weight goal. So that the goal then would be to decrease my weight from 185 pounds to 160 pounds by March 2025. Another vision that would be more representative of a team vision, a professional vision, would be a team that provides consistent trainings that impact individuals and the organization. Now, the goal to know when you've arrived is trainings that demonstrate a measurable impact will increase from 60% to 80% by the end of FY25 quarter 2. So I'm just going to let you think on that right for a minute. We don't have much time to share any examples, but if someone has written a vision and a goal, if they would like to drop that in the chat, I would love to see at least one example before we move on. So that concludes the content that I wanted to talk about, but I do want to open it up for a discussion and ask, what questions do you have? As we've talked about these concepts that seem pretty simple in Word, when it comes to actual application, what questions are there out there? Go ahead, Mr. Williamson.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate this session. It's super informative, and I love what you laid out here. My question would be, can you explain a little bit about how to ensure that the vision of focusing on one or two wildly important tasks or goals can be accomplished if senior leadership is not on board? And I'm not talking about anyone in particular. I'm simply asking. I know that from a lot of different levels of leadership, there's a perception that there are a number of tasks that are all equally as important that we're trying to get done on a daily basis. So my question is how do you bring something like this to your leadership and say, this is what I would like to do, this is going to be the impact, without, if they are not fully on board, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. And it's something I face. I'm going to give just a couple principles because there's not a perfect answer. A lot of it depends on who your leader is and what exactly you have going on. The first principle I'd say is communication. Really understanding what the leader wants when they come down with, I assume that there's maybe 5 to 10 priorities that are all equally important. And that's part of the issue is, okay, according to our senior leader, everything here is equally important. So what really should we focus on? Having that communication and that strong relationship with your leaders to be able to have a conversation of, can you help me understand why each of these priorities are important or what each of these priorities do for each other so that you get a clear picture of why they feel that these priorities are important. I'm guessing that they're not saying all these priorities are important just because they want to make your life miserable and they want to just make everything important. It's probably because they're getting pressure from above as well. In the VA and in government, we're all middle managers. So they're probably getting pressure as well, which is helping to contribute to why this is happening. And so having that conversation of why do we have these priorities? Why do we have these goals? From a lens of curiosity, of I want to understand why we have these different priorities so that I can better execute on them, because I want to help you be successful as a leader, and I need to be able to understand why these are important. And once you get that more information, that's when you can start to be a little creative and start using that focusing question from the one thing. If you remember, that focusing question is what is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So once you have that clear understanding from your leaders of why are all these different things high priorities, that's where you and your team can creatively look at all these priorities and think, are one or two of these, if we really hit well on one or two of these, will that actually make some of the other ones easier? And if that's the case, then I would say that should be your focus. Um, Now, I'm speaking in very general terms. It's obviously easier said than done. But the two principles that I would highlight would be, again, communication. And then second, using that focusing question of what is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Like I said, this is a small group and we have a lot of experience in here and a lot of knowledge. So I'm curious if anyone else in this group of supervisors has had this experience and what they have done that they've found successful.
Thank you. It does. That was a great answer. And I think that one of the most important things is just getting this out so that more managers, more leaders, so that this becomes more of a cultural thing, vice just a class that we got and we would like to figure out how to implement. But if this becomes culture, I think that's where you see the change. And
Yes.
I can't recall it. I picked all my classes for TES. Is it something like this offered at TES for supervisors and managers, or is this not in that?
I am not sure actually. That's a great question. That's something I can follow up with you. I'm
Yeah.
not part of the TES team, so I'm actually not
Okay.
sure what's on the agenda.
Yeah, this would be a great one, I think. I mean, there is a lot of great ones on there, and I selected a lot of great ones. But this is, I think, really important. If we want to see the change that you're talking about, I think the more we can disseminate this and talk about it, I think the better chance we have of implementing that.
Love it. I 100% agree. Any other thoughts? Any other questions, concerns? I think the big thing that Mr. Williamson brought up that is just so key is in Franklin Covey, they say easy say, hard do. And what they mean by that is you talk about these principles and you're like, yeah, this makes sense. This is great. Like, of course, we need to do this. But then really when you get down to it and actually try to implement it, that's where it really gets hard. And so I do want to take a second. We have Elizabeth Pravat here. She is, again, one of our learning management officers. She has been a supervisor in the VBA for a long time. And I asked her if she'd just provide a quick example of how she has been able to apply these principles.
Sure. Thank you so much, Bryce. So I have had some experience working as a coach in the Veteran Service Center and also as a chief within a business line. And one of the instances that comes to mind to me is um, in the service center regional office environment, a lot of the specific metrics and goals, they are delivered to you. You don't have a lot of control or say over what exactly you are striving for, and that can feel a little bit limiting. But I think that there are some things that you could do to really dig into methods that you can do within your team and within your control to apply those and to help drive behavior towards the desired metric. So an example that I used in the past was when I was a coach of the quality review team. We the national quality program STAR, they would do monthly reviews on a random sample of cases, and generally when we would get them back, we would only communicate with the employee if there was a problem, so if there was an error that was found, and we would talk to them and have them correct it. When thinking about that behavior and thinking like we are trying to actually encourage high quality, so we need to also do something to drive the behavior of striving for success and celebrating the individuals who did the case correctly and um, made positive strides toward our goal for the station. We kind of switched the narrative there. Yes, we did reach out to the individual who made the quality error for correction and for a learning opportunity. But in addition to that, we began celebrating the claims processors who process the claim accurately and correctly. And we would contact them, let them know that this case went under review, it was found to be accurate, well done. And that was kind of one of the goals within our management team, to just ensure that we're celebrating the individuals who are working in a positive manner to achieve that metric. So even though the metric wasn't within our control, we wanted to drive that behavior that worked toward the goal.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's a great example. I think just one thing to kind of close out that I'll touch on that you both touched on was, this is the job of a leader. It goes back to what we often talk about of being a leader versus a manager. A manager gets all those priorities from above and tries to just accomplish them all. A leader is going to take those priorities that they get, even if there's a ton of them, and is going to dissect them and is going to understand them and to figure out what is the most important. Which of these will help the other ones be easier? And then help direct the team to do that and to focus on that. All right. So just to close out, I do want to touch back on the references and encourage everyone to read them. Again, it's the 4 disciplines of execution and the one thing, the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. And in summary, just to review our objectives, visualize what success looks like in your life and for your team. Hopefully you were able to do that today. Narrow your focus to the 1 to 2 things that will drive success, easier said than done. And then develop a clear vision and goals to guide you and your team to that success. Some key points are asking that 30,000-foot question. What does success look like for your team? Is this clear to everyone on the team? Focus on less to accomplish more. A vision is a clear and focused statement of what you want to become. And a goal is a measurable indicator of when you have arrived at your vision. So to close out, I want to share a short video clip of one of my favorite authors and voices on leadership. This is Simon Sinek.
I like to think that our job as leaders is not to motivate people, but to inspire them. I believe in hiring motivated people and then giving them something to work towards. We can motivate people all kinds of ways with carrots and sticks, incentives or disincentives. But inspiration is something different. It's the pursuit of something larger than ourselves, feeling like we're a community, feeling like we're doing something together. And you can see this. The most successful organizations, we look to our colleagues and our coworkers and we trust each other. We feel like we have to do this together, compared to an organization where there's poor leadership and it's only external motivations like money or bonuses, and everybody sort of is in it for themselves. They may like each other, but they're not incentivized or desired to help each other. So that is the job of leadership. Leadership is responsible for inspiring the people. So there's multiple things. Number 1, vision. Where are you going? It's like trying to get people to get into a car with you, but not telling them where we're going. You're more likely to get them to get in the car if you tell them where you're going. Vision is where we want to take the organization in terms other than success or customer service, anything like that. But literally, how do we imagine a world that doesn't exist? This is what vision is. That's why we call it vision. We can see it in our imaginations. Another part of it is the ability to communicate. Believe it or not, communication is a huge part of good leadership. We're social animals. The way we express love or friendship is with words. And so too, good leaders find words that capture their vision, but also make people feel seen and heard. And then that's the third thing, empathy. People are human beings. We all want to be seen, heard, understood. We all want to feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. We want to be seen as human beings. We have ambitions and egos, and our good leaders, they know all of that and they consider that.
So as leaders, we have a special opportunity. I'd say not even just an opportunity or responsibility to inspire those that we lead. When we can visualize and communicate what success looks like, when we can narrow our focus to the most important things and provide a clear vision and goals to get there, that's when we become leaders, like what was stated by Simon Sinek. We become leaders who inspire those we lead and have a lasting impact on those we serve. So lastly, I have a challenge for you. Before we jump into that, I do want to address this picture on the slide. There's a picture of 4 birds sitting on a branch. This picture represents a favorite saying of mine. 4 birds are sitting on a log. 1 decides to fly away. How many are left? All right, I'll just give you the answer. There's 4. There's 4 left. Just deciding to fly away, 0 because they will all follow. Just deciding and actually doing something are 2 completely different things. This hour that we spent together, it'll be value added if you take action and do something differently. My hope is not that you go away from the session saying, oh, that was nice. You know, that was a cool story. That was a good presentation. Those are some good principles. My hope is that you'll commit to doing something, taking action based on what you learned. So therefore, my challenge today is written right here. I want you to schedule a time with your team to hold an FY25 planning session. Use some of that time to collaboratively visualize with your team what success looks like. Then take that visualization, focus it down, and together develop a vision and goals for your team. If you've already done this, awesome. You can review it with the team and make any appropriate adjustments. And I can promise you that as you do that, you and your team, they're going to develop something to work towards. They're going to feel more inspired. They're going to feel more engaged because they're going to be able to visualize what success looks like, and they'll know how they can contribute to that success. And with that, thank you all, and I will turn the time back over to our host.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olsen, for that great presentation on visualizing success. I am now putting the survey link into the chat for everyone. Please click on the link to provide your feedback. Dr. Olsen's contact information is available for you here if you would like to connect with him or reach out to ask any of your questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's event, and have a great rest of your day.